you so very much for checking out the Sportsline Podcast on the CHCH media platform. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Hey, I say this on a daily basis. This podcast is a space to highlight the outstanding athletes, coaches, broadcasters, and in some cases, executives from Southern Ontario. Today, we open the spectrum to someone special, an individual who will never be satisfied with mediocre in the broadcast business. From her days as a volunteer play-by-play roller derby announcer to hosting the morning show on Global Regina to excelling as a reporter, host, and announcer in Saskatchewan with the NLL's Rush, the CEBL's Rattlers, and the CFL's Rough Riders, Daniella Ponticelli has set and accomplished personal goals. In many cases, she's made history by being the first as a woman. At this time, she's one of the lead play-by-play broadcasters for the Professional Women's Hockey League. And on January 1st of 2024, Daniella's voice became part of history.
Signed free agent Alex Carpenter, and she'll take the draw on New York, wins in Shelton with her stick on that, and she gets it! Ella Shelton scores! History is hers!
Well, history is Daniella Ponticelli's, who joins us on the Sportsline Podcast. This is great to see you, Daniella. It's great to catch up with you. Really looking forward to chatting with you.
Thanks so much for having me. That was such an incredible introduction. Oh my goodness.
Well, these are all things earned by you.
I know, but every time I see the first day of the PWHL, that day it's life-changing. It's life-changing for so many people, for all these future generations. So every time I see that, it kind of hits that spot that it just, wow, like there are certain things that even in your wildest dreams, you don't even think of. And that would be one of them for sure.
There's so much to kind of go through here, but I do have to ask you about one thing. You and I,
Sure.
First met on a CFL This Week broadcast with the Ticats Audio Network. I do that as well, too. So it introduced me to someone that's important to your life that I need to just get an update for. How is Tonks?
Oh, she's great. Yeah, she's hanging out. Actually, today they're not in the office. I know when we last chatted, it was I had very different sort of situations. So she was milling about, hanging out on the couch and all of that. Oh, she's doing great. Thanks for checking in.
Just checking on your friendly cat. I know it's an important part of your life, eh? Hey,
Yeah.
You know what? I'll tell you, and I brought this up in the opening, and this blew me away. How does someone in your position, when you look all the way back, starts in the roller derby league as an announcer? Can you talk to me about those days?
Oh, absolutely. I was actually just a bunch of Facebook memories popped up of some of those early days, because the first real break I got doing that was January 2018. And it happened because Saskatchewan made history. They became the first Canadian province to enter into and be accepted into an all United States Battle of the All-Stars event. And it just so happened that year, the tournament really encouraged teams to bring their own play-by-play person, so that when they finally had the spotlight and were being streamed internationally, it could be somebody who really knew the team speaking to the team. And so that was my introduction. So I really have Saskatchewan to thank for being able to make that piece of Canadian roller derby history. And then from there, I just met so many incredible people who were also doing this mostly on a volunteer basis, but just loved the sport, loved announcing. And it was really through their encouragement that I kept doing it, and even thinking that I was doing it right. It was such a unique and very complicated game. You really need to know it well in order to share that with other people and hopefully educate them on the broadcast. And I got to know the game because I started as an athlete. I learned how to roller skate, found a fantastic community, loved hitting people. It's great. Full contact sport on concrete, no big deal. It's awesome. And there is such a great sense of community. A lot of that, I feel, overlaps into things like women's hockey, to be honest. Just that sense of community. And obviously very small world in all sports, I find. Once you know some people, you get to know everybody, and everybody knows everybody. It's pretty amazing.
Well, you did bring up the province of Saskatchewan, which obviously has been a very, very critical, a home at one point of your life. I think of things that you did with the Regina Rams, the Rush in the NLL, the Rattlers in the CW, in the Canadian League Basketball League, and of course the Rough Riders, who were just the patriarch of the province. I know you can attest to that. Talk to me about those days. It's amazing to me, a broadcaster, you carried a camera, you were an announcer, sideline, post-game show. That really opened you up to media, did it not?
That's exactly it. Sort of my guiding principle through this whole journey has been just be open to it all, because you don't know what you don't know, and you also don't know what you don't like or what you could potentially really like and really enjoy. And I think back to those days, my first real job with the Saskatchewan Roughriders was actually working behind the camera at Mosaic Stadium on the Maxtron. So anyone who's ever gone to a game there, the big screen. We love to tell everyone it's the largest outdoor screen in Canada. It still is. So that's kind of that's a really special point. But being in that seat really opened things up, and I saw how everybody else worked on game day. And I remember, looking at even like the in-stand announcers and the people in the booth and going, that would be pretty amazing to do. Okay, but it wasn't even at that point that I had really connected the dots. I just was able to see that. And I truly believe when you can see and be near these things and start to look at, like, could I do that? How can I do that? Where do I go from here? And so the roller derby thing ended up being just something I just really love to do as a complete side hobby. And I remember actually in 2020, that year prior to what eventually happened being the pandemic year, I had told myself that I needed to make the decision I don't think I could volunteer anymore. It was just a lot. Like, I loved doing it, but it was taking up all of my vacation time. I needed to make some money, and I'm like, maybe this means I'll never call a game again, but I have to make that decision. Then the pandemic happened, and I thought, okay, am I ever going to call another sports game ever again? And so it was a very interesting time in my life, just kind of navigating that, almost grieving in a sense, like, is this it for sports, right? I wasn't sure from my path and my journey, which had kind of only just started prior to the pandemic.
Because you had some experience with Global as well, too, kind of more of a newsy role. Is that not correct?
So my journey, I always tell people, very different start, I think, for most. I fully went on the news track. I was convinced that that's all I wanted to do. My dream out of university was to be a newspaper reporter, and I was able to do that right out of university. I went and worked at the Brandon Sun, eventually the Winnipeg Sun as well, where I got to meet incredible sports journalists, including the late Ted Wyman. And so it's just, it's amazing how you get influenced by all these people in your lives, and you don't even always realize it until later on, when perhaps you start to do things that are, you start to go, wow, I picked up some really great habits and skills from just being around these people and watching them and learning from them, right? But that was always my track. I was fully news, and then it was truly getting into it from behind the scenes and then moving forward into the broadcast space of being either the voice or a face or a sideline reporter. That was really my introduction to it. I never saw, going into school, for example, I know a lot of guys were like, I know I'm going to be on the mic. That just wasn't it for me. And I don't know if many women, especially, more than a decade ago, were thinking that either.
I think that's an important part to go to, is that in many cases, and a lot of the gigs that you pulled off at that time, you were the first as a woman to do it. And I think I don't know if it was an important thing for you or you even recognized that, but it really is life building for what you've accomplished in your career.
It's pretty incredible. I see you have the part of the WHL, and I want to give credit. Of course, there was a woman before me who was the first ever to do it on radio, but that was 20 plus years prior to that. So I always bring that up because there've always been women who are capable of this work, who love this work, who've laid the foundation, perhaps either not getting credit or not getting consistent opportunities, right? So they're able to break barriers, but then it couldn't continue. And so that's what I'm loving about this era right now is we're finally seeing, sure, still plenty of women, not just myself, but other women who are becoming firsts and doing things for the first time, especially in broadcast. But the great thing is knowing not the last, certainly not the last, and we're going to see even more. But honestly, when I got into this space, I had no idea that there would be this many firsts still available for women to kind of cross. So that was something that was surprising for me. I just never really thought about that. I never even thought that, oh, this hadn't happened before. It is special always, but it's certainly not, I think a lot of people feel this way. That's not what you strive for necessarily. You're just here to work and learn and develop and get better. And if things work out, that those opportunities align where, that's the honor you're bestowed, I just always want to do right by that.
And I would think that in many cases for yourself, because we always want to just accept and sort of relish the positive. But I'm going to ask you this too about the negative. Did you experience any negativity from people, whether they be faceless people or people that maybe you even knew, for some of the stuff that you were the first to do?
I think in short, yes. And sometimes it comes from surprising places because it's not always the audience that has that backlash. Sometimes it's people you work with or people, kind of in the similar space where, oh my goodness, suddenly this opportunity is being given to women. I don't know how I feel about that, if you can read between the lines. So, it's just an interesting world to navigate. But what's great is that I've been able to find fantastic people who are either in my corner or going through the same thing, or other women in this space, and we have found a way to really come together and always champion one another, always enjoy and see what's out there for these women for future opportunities. And I think I know that might sound like, oh, okay, well, you're just looking at the positive. You have to, right? That's the only way sometimes to navigate through this. If you get too bogged down with other things, that's really tough. But for the most part, I have to say, it's been pretty great. There's been good feedback, constructive feedback, things that I can use and get better. And that's all I'm striving to do. And I think that's at the crux of it all. It's the surprising part is that sometimes the detractors are people you wish, right, would come around and be supportive of these things, but they might be, whether it's they're threatened by it or they're unsure of their place now that women are finding their feet. It's a very interesting dynamic.
Well, it's so
your question.
But it's so important in media because there are people that are judging you, right? Whether your looks or your voice or everything. And I think sometimes it's important for us and people like maybe me being the first black for certain particular things. That yes, you learn from the positive, and it's great to soak that in and give that positive feeling to yourself. But sometimes it's a negative that motivates you even more in some cases to just push through, and that's why I asked that question. So, congratulations for you to meet that head on and just kind of learn from it as well too. You're really
totally
is.
Right. It is a complete motivating factor, in the sense of when something gets you down or you see this pushback. Feel it. Perhaps it's just in the way that people act around you in a given space. You just go out there and say, I'm going to do the best I can do and be myself and understand that that's enough, which is not an easy thing to do, right? Because this is a very judgmental industry, and it's supposed to be, right? It's a performance. It would be like if you were on stage and people were reviewing you nightly. It's the same kind of idea, right? So, I'm really glad you brought that up because it's a discussion we don't often have. It's not just about, anonymous trolls on the internet. It's sometimes just making sure that you can find your way in this space to begin with.
A lot of this experience that you gained would be in the province of Saskatchewan, as we talked about. Most people that will watch and listen to this podcast will be in Ontario. Can you explain, because I was there once for the Memorial Cup, and I got a little taste. The province of Saskatchewan, Regina, I guess, is the central part for where you were. What's that province all about? I mean, I can only tell. I mean, from my experience, obviously, would be more with the Canadian Football League, and the Rider fans are certainly just nuts.
Well, you packed a whole lot into that question. I like that. I think it all comes down to that sense of community and that sense of pride you have, especially when you're in a province like Saskatchewan, a province that perhaps gets overlooked sometimes or not considered, the greatest destination to go for a vacation. And I think a lot of people have understood that this is the type of province where you work hard, you get by, you deal with some really tough conditions, summer and winter, and you just come out as a community and with a lot of pride for where you're from. And there is that sense for sure, kind of an us against the world approach sometimes. And I think that's where the Rider Pride bit gets to benefit, because it's such a legacy brand, a legacy team in that province. It means so much. It has certainly had its ups and downs. And you think back to the 90s and the telethons, actually the early 2000s even, to save that team. And now we get to benefit with having that Rider Pride and just being such a connected fan base, because it is more than just the team. It really is about Saskatchewan. And that's why, of course, the name was chosen, Saskatchewan, not Regina, not Saskatoon, although that is a great rivalry, by the way. Any Saskatoon and Regina rivalry, you see it in the WHL, you see it in, your junior football teams and your U Sports football teams. Those rivalries are so great. So even within the province, obviously, much like Ontario, you've got your just down the highway rivals, but in Saskatchewan, it feels even more close. Those sorts of competitive battles.
Well, I was always blown away because, I have an affection, obviously, being part of the Tiger Cats and doing the post game and the pregame and the halftime show, to listening to what all you guys are doing around the league. I just could not believe that of all the post game shows, you guys would be on the air for 3 hours, 3.5 hours. It would blow me away. I'm like, but the phone calls keep coming. It's amazing to me.
Yeah, we were given very loose guidelines at the time. I think this might have changed, but we were given very loose guidelines as to when we needed to be out, because essentially that was our time to shine. That was when we would get the listeners. People were very invested. I always loved to hear I made it all the way to Lloydminster. I made it all the way to PA, Prince Albert, and you got me home safe. That was great. But really, the way that I looked at it is, if the calls are coming in, we're going to stop. At a certain point, we would stop actually saying the phone number to be like, okay, lines are going to close out soon. And people would still call in. And so if that's the case, great. And it really, there's nothing like it. And I know this. There's nothing like live radio, number one, but also there's nothing like having that instant connection with people on the phone. I mean, we just don't have it nowadays in the same way. So that part was really great. And, I would never know always. Sometimes you'd go in and you think, okay, well, that was a bad loss. I think the lines are going to be all fired up, and it wouldn't be, or, that was a close loss. I think people are going to be really connected. And then everyone was, completely opposite ends of the spectrum on their thoughts. So that part was also fascinating too, right? Just all the different reactions that fans have. And I just, a part of me wishes I had been there last year when there was a bit more success. We always had a lot of fun. Loved working with Wes Cates and Don Hewitt as well.
Oh, Wes, what a piece of work. He's outstanding. So everything that you've put into it, all the value, all the experience, everything that you have put together comes together with, I'll ask you if it's a dream gig, the Professional Women's Hockey League. How did that come to form for you? And here you are in a league that's brand new, and you are one of the point people in this league calling games.
That's a great question, because there's still times when I go, you know, there's the invisible string idea, right? Where certain things will connect you and things will happen. And sometimes you don't really know how to explain it. And in this sense, it really was a step-by-step process. So I started with U Sports women's hockey not all that long ago in 2022, October of 22. And I got to be with, actually, wait, hold up. Now I have to do math. October of 2021. Yes, okay. It was the 21 to 22 season. That's important because, of course, COVID was still a factor that year. And so I followed the University of Saskatchewan team. I was living in Regina, so I was commuting up to Saskatoon. So even home games were away games. And then we would often bus to, say, Edmonton or Calgary, fly out to BC when they played there, that sort of thing. Can West is a wonderful conference, but it's a very tough one to travel because you're going really long distances to get to Winnipeg and all of that. The point is, I learned so much. That's where I really got to hone my skills with hockey. And it was radio too. And you know this, when you're calling radio, you're looking at everything, trying to paint that picture, right? Puck geography, what's happening, time checks. You're doing so much more and you're often by yourself. I was working by myself a lot. And the point is that I learned so much. And for better or for worse, I don't even want to know what some of those early ones sounded like. But hey, that's part of the journey. But it was a shortened season because of COVID, and we did the testing every week. Like, it was quite a commitment to decide to do this, to try this out. And it was during that time that I quit my full-time job, which I'm sure my mom was really happy about, and to pursue this full-time, right? To actually say, I want to do this. I want to chase freelance opportunities. The SJHL was fantastic. The Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, they were so on board in bringing me on to call a game, to provide color, to do sideline, just whatever was available. So I got to learn from them. I got to learn from the WHL. I did color before I ended up doing play-by-play that first time. Point is that all of this was growing, and I was like, okay, I'm fully in this. I love hockey. This is great. Fast forward a year, and I happened to get an opportunity to call nationals for U Sports women's hockey. Again, women's hockey providing that opportunity. And from there, TSN, I had been trying to, like, hey, just want to let you know I exist. But it was that nationals experience that led to them calling me a couple of weeks later and saying, would you like to call some women's worlds games in Brampton? And I thought, like, this is a joke. This can't be true. Like, this is amazing. And it all happened so quickly. Then I go, okay, I still don't know what's going to happen next. I'm doing football now. I love football. We'll see what happens. And as it would go, after that Brampton experience, that's where I met Sammy Jo Small. If everyone knows her, she's an incredible member of Team Canada. She's won Olympic gold medals, world championships as a goaltender for them. And she was involved with the Premier Hockey Federation. And I remember even at that point going, I would love to one day work for the PHF. So PHF dissolves, and I'm like, okay, I guess I don't know what's happening in the women's hockey space. I've got all these other things going on, including making a move to Southern Ontario for personal reasons. And I'll wrap it up real quick. The point of this is that everything aligned in the most incredible way that, yes, I was already going to be moving to Southern Ontario. I had opened a door with CBC doing the U Sports stuff. I had opened a door with TSN doing the Worlds. And from there, I auditioned. I did an audition for the PWHL, and I did it during Grey Cup week. And thank goodness for Hamilton 2023, because I literally had touched down to go to Grey Cup in Hamilton, but instead went off, did the audition, then went to go and enjoy the Grey Cup festivities, hoping that I had done enough. And so the timeline moved pretty quickly, but that's kind of the story of it. I hope that, I know it's a long-winded one, but it's kind of a special one because you never know where things are going to take you. And so I always give full credit to U Sports, full credit to the University of Saskatchewan as well for pushing for their women's team to be covered, because that was something that at the time everyone was interested in Mike Babcock coaching the men's side. Yep. And they said, that's great. We could absolutely cover that. We want our women covered too.
I mean, it's important that I'm glad you built everything up there, because it is part of the connectors. And I really think for many of us in many situations of success, all the dots just kind of come together. And I think it's amazing that it came together for you in that way. Now, when you are doing these games, like, is there ever an aha moment, or does that, like, I mean, obviously you're focused on the game, but I mean, this has got to be the ultimate for you.
Oh, it's incredible, right? Like game one, day one, which you showed a clip of, is forever. Whenever anyone asks what's your favorite memory, I don't know what is going to top that. But the fact that this league is consistently doing amazing things in that first year, all of the big games, Scotiabank, of course, we just had the second sellout of Scotiabank for a PWHL game. It's just amazing. But also the Bell Center game. So that was my first time really calling a big game. It's the biggest, and I think it's going to stay that way for an indoor venue, right? Given that the Bell Center is the biggest for an NHL crowd. But the point is that there are people that want this, and the Canadian markets especially have come out, not to say anything else about the fact that the U.S. markets that have been part of the takeover tour have also come out. Hey, there's our Barbies. But this is also part of it. I laugh about the Barbies. I grew up playing Barbies, right? That was my thing. And so it's just pretty cool to be part of something that is also very much female forward, not only in the broadcasters, but in the sponsorships, in the leadership, in the executive. And it really is a dream come true. There's Sammy Jo and I. So she and I have called a lot of more international games. We just called a couple at the U18 Worlds together. I also worked with Cheryl Pounder on that. So you're also getting to learn from these incredible women who they were part of the foundation, right, that led to all of this. Becky Keller being one of them too. It's so great. We look back at the video from, the 2002 Olympics or 2010 in Vancouver, and there's Becky Keller. That was from the NHL All-Star Weekend. So overall, this is a dream, and I always want to be humble. I'm incredibly grateful for it, and I also know that none of this is promised to you. You go into the season, you know a little bit about your schedule. You don't always know about all the other things that are in store. So you just take it as it comes, and it's pretty incredible.
Got to ask you a current league question. What is going on with the Toronto Scepters? Like, what? How, with all that talent, why are they tied for last place? What's happening?
Tied for last right now. So much of it is just basically not being able to even push some games into overtime. I know that sounds silly because the answer is get more wins, but their regulation wins this season are actually on par with some of the teams at the top of the standings. It's their inability to either get overtime wins or potentially even an overtime loss point, which they managed to do. So for those who don't know, in the PWHL, it is that 3-point system, which I think is kind of fun because if they go on a big run, say at the latter end of this year, they could easily start skipping over people once you start putting 3-point games together, right? 3-point wins together. So it's 3 points for a regulation win, 2 for overtime or shootout, and then 1 if you get that overtime or shootout loss. So I think that at the end of the day, it's Toronto trying to find itself. They did struggle. I don't want to put it all on goaltending. I love goaltenders, by the way. I think they're awesome. So I have all the respect of the world for them, but some of it was some unfortunate goaltending early on, and they're still, I think, trying to find Kristen Campbell's their number one, but trying to find some consistency there because our rookie Reagan Kirk has also stepped in a few times. Natalie Spooner coming back will be big for the team, but we also can't put that all on her shoulders. I know you know this, but this is someone who's going to be coming back from quite a big break and quite a long injury. I think what's even more mind-blowing is I was just looking at the schedule. Saturday's game at Coca-Cola Coliseum, that's game 15. They have 30 games in the season. We're at the halfway point on Saturday. So you also think, oh my goodness, if Natalie Spooner doesn't get in soon, she's missing half, if not more than half of the season, right? So and I don't know if it was really clear at the beginning how long she would be out. So I think that's another part of this whole story.
Yeah, well, she's an incredible goal scorer, right? I mean, obviously led the league last year, though. So if they get that offense going, that could really get to help all 3 lines out and get that team going to where I believe they should be. One final one for you, Daniella, and we're on the at the precipices of something really special in this country and maybe North America, the world, perhaps. You know, the PWHL clearly up and running, second season. No reason to believe there are any issues there. The obvious growth questions that are going to be asked. But there's also the Northern Super League in soccer. There's a WNBA with the Toronto Tempo coming just down the road. Like, women's sports right now, like, where can it go from this point? As you talk about representation, I think it's become more than that. Like, they are standing on their own.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because too often the conversation is just about representation. That will always be a conversation. It's an important one to have. So I'm just going to put that aside for a second and say, absolutely, women's sports it's not just a moment, it's a movement. Billie Jean King has said that. We've heard others echo it. And this is it, right? The time is here. The appetite is here. People are putting their dollars to it as well. The conversations are turning. There's going to be haters. Okay. And I find that there's haters everywhere. I think of the people who don't like the CFL, for example, and who constantly bring up the fact that the CFL is not the NFL. Okay, sure. What a great argument. But it's the same for the women's space, right? Okay, sure. It's not men's sports. So what does it offer? It offers an incredible community, a great product, tremendous talent, great athleticism, fantastic stories. I mean, these women all have incredible stories, because there isn't a clear path, and there hasn't been a clear path for a lot of these leagues on where to go and how to get there. So especially in the PWHL, of course, so many of those stories are, I never imagined this even 5 years ago, and here I am. Or I just graduated from NCAA and I'm living this incredible life that I never even thought was possible 2 years ago. So there's so much to it. And that's all I'll say is the investment is there. The interest is there. We're getting the broadcasters on board, which is huge. And that's what it takes. It takes being visible, being accessible, and being part of the mainstream conversation. So being able to see yourself on a highlight show or hear commercials about the upcoming game, all of those things matter.
Well, Daniella, I'll tell you this. I'm actually happy. I'm very proud to be part of this, to actually see this generation of everything you just talked about there in the terms of women's sports, PWHL, especially in your case. But having you talk about your experience and, your growth and obviously where you are today, I think it's important for our listeners and our viewers to know your story. And we really thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate this.
Well, it's been great. Look forward to seeing you on the tube. That's your Sportsline Podcast for the day, folks. And if you've just seen and heard, we love talking sports with history makers. That's our thing. If you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote, the Sportsline Podcast do want to hear from you. Please hit that subscribe and thumbs up button if you have something to say. We appreciate your comments always. A reminder, if it's sports, news, or what's trending now, our podcast network has you covered. For the fine folks that produce the Sportsline Podcast, thanks so very much. We'll see you tomorrow.